A president's threat to deploy military troops into a major American city is sparking a firestorm of controversy and bipartisan alarm. The recent proposal to send National Guard forces into Chicago to address crime is being met with fierce resistance from Illinois officials, who are labeling the move not just ineffective, but dangerously misguided. And this is the part most people miss. The pushback isn't coming from expected political opponents alone. It's also coming from within the president's own support base, signaling a deep flaw in the strategy. Illinois Governor JB Pritzker and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson have publicly condemned the idea, framing it not as a genuine crime-fighting measure, but as a blatant act of political intimidation. At a major press conference, they accused the president of searching for a pretext to deploy the military into a city located in a Democrat-led blue state purely to threaten his political rivals. They further bolstered their position by highlighting a significant success story, a 30% reduction in murders so far this year compared to the same period last year. The city is actually on track to record the fewest homicides since 2014. But here's where it gets controversial. The criticism extends far beyond typical partisan lines. Take, for instance, Chicago Alderman Nick Sposato. He is a former firefighter and is known as the president's most steadfast supporter on the city council. Yet on this issue, he is in direct opposition, calling the plan a terrible idea. His reasoning cuts to the core of the practical problems. National Guard troops are not trained police officers. They lack policing powers, don't know how to respond to routine service calls, and are unfamiliar with Chicago's complex street layout. Sposato painted a worrying picture, asking the public to consider the risks of putting 18, 19-year-old kids on streets they're unfamiliar with M16s, calling it a recipe for disaster. This perspective is echoed by law enforcement experts. Gary McCarthy, the former superintendent of the Chicago Police Department, who now leads a suburban force, pointed out the critical training gap. He explained that these soldiers would be tasked with responsibilities like car stops and street stops for which they are utterly unprepared. He raised a startling safety concern. They might not even be properly armed, which could ironically make them targets for violence rather than deterrents to it. This situation forces us to ask a tough question. When does federal help become federal overreach? Federal law typically requires a state's governor to request National Guard assistance, though the president does hold the power to deploy them unilaterally in extreme scenarios, such as an insurrection. Historically, the Guard has been called upon for major events or large-scale protests to protect infrastructure and assist with crowd control. Roles vastly different from daily hands-on urban policing. So, what's the solution? Both Sposato and McCarthy suggest that instead of engaging in a public war of words, political leaders should seek a collaborative, bipartisan approach. They argue that Chicago's officials should directly communicate with the president to develop a more effective and less dangerous plan. Sposato cynically noted that the current standoff seems to be a case of fighting one publicity stunt with another publicity stunt. While McCarthy warned that this political infighting is not good for the country. This leaves us with a profound debate. Is using the military for domestic law enforcement ever a justifiable solution? Or does it fundamentally undermine the principles of community policing and local control? What do you think? Is this a necessary drastic measure for public safety, or a dangerous politicization of the military? We welcome your thoughts and opinions in the comments below.